your time this morning. Look,
Good morning
can we
to
just
you,
start
David.
on prices? When we spoke a couple of months ago, you were highlighting the fact that wholesale electricity prices have come down nearly 30%, and that you expected to see a fall in retail prices from July as a result. You said the government expects that these reductions will be passed on to consumers in full, and we'll be watching closely to see that this is the case. Well, we've now seen the big three release their prices. There is a bit of a fall coming in Queensland, but barely any fall in the rest of the market. Is that good enough? Is it what you expected?
Well, we have turned the corner, David, on prices. They have come down from the big three in Queensland, in New South Wales, in South Australia. If you're an Energy Australia customer in Brisbane and you run a small business like a cafe or a hairdresser, that will be a saving of around $470 a year. If you're a household, it's around $80 a year. Well, this is just the start. Well, if you're in Sydney, it's under $100 a year for a small business, but if you're relying on gas, it can be over around $250 a year. So they're not insignificant amounts of money, but as we know, we need to see prices come down more. And it does show that our plan is working. It's in stark contrast to what occurred under the Labor Party, where prices doubled during their time in office and went up each and every year, sometimes more than 20%. Now, you're right to point to the wholesale price. That's around a third of people's energy bills. That's down around 30% year on year, and that will start to flow through to customers as time goes forward.
But this is my question, is it flowing through enough? Because yes, while Queensland, as you rightly point out, there's been some reductions there, for households in Sydney and Melbourne, there's really not much change at all. Is there enough flow through of this wholesale price reduction?
Well, the Victorian prices are not reset till January, so we'll wait for them because they're on a different calendar to the other states. But the wholesale prices have come down, and what happens is that each of the energy companies...
Is it enough, is what I'm asking?
Oh, it's certainly not enough. We want to see prices come down more, and we're confident that that will be the case.
So what are you going to do about this? Because as you said on Friday, unless the retailers get prices down and they pick up their act, you will see more intervention. What sort of intervention are you thinking about?
Well, we'll await the ACCC's report, which will be a significant report handed to the Treasurer at the end of this month. They're looking at the entire stack, if you like, when it comes to putting together an energy bill. They're looking at the network prices, they're looking at the retail prices and, of course, the wholesale prices. But we've taken action on every front and will continue to do so. The Prime Minister's intervention in the gas market, where we saw more gas provided to Australians before it's exported overseas, has seen the ACCC report that gas prices have come down by up to 50%.
OK, but I want to come to that. I want to come to the gas market, but just coming back to whether they've passed this wholesale cut through to retailers, you're saying more intervention might be on the cards. Can I just ask what that is? Would you actually try and control prices?
Look, I'm not going to foreshadow any particular actions that the government may or may not be taking, other than to say that the companies are on notice. As you know, the Australian Energy Market Commission released a significant report over the course of the week as well, which showed that the public's trust and confidence in energy companies has fallen. Now, that's obviously a result in part of the price rises that they've been hit with, but also the poor service, the lack of innovation, the complexity of the bill, the conditional offers that these energy companies have been provided. And in the words of the AEMC, you only get offered a discount from the energy companies when you threaten to leave to go to another one. That's effectively a loyalty tax that's being imposed on the customers. That's not good enough. These companies have a social licence to operate, and the public are telling them very clearly that they need to lift their game.
I mean, frankly, Minister, it's a rip-off is what it is. So what are the regulators or you going to do about it?
Well, we have taken significant action to improve the simplicity and the comparability of the public's bill. We've seen over 1 million hits on the government comparison website, and the AMC has reported that over the course of the last year, in certain jurisdictions, nearly a quarter of customers or more have changed retailers or contracts. And by doing so, David, they can save up to $800 on a market offer compared to the more expensive standing
is
offers.
huge. You can be charged $800 more than the cheapest offer in the market in, I think it was in South Australia. So again, getting back to what more you can do about this, because despite those steps, this is still happening. You're not ruling out some sort of control of prices.
Well, look, let's wait and see where the ACCC report lands, and that will be very significant because it's been a lengthy, comprehensive study by a key regulator in our system. But the government has been taking action. That action is now starting to produce results with lower prices. The companies have not served their customers well. They have a lot of explaining to do, and they do need to lift their game.
All right, the gas market, you mentioned the efforts that you and the Prime Minister have been to try and get the gas exporters to keep more Australian gas in Australia. And yet last week, AGL revealed it plans to build a gas import terminal in Victoria. It's expecting to bring in gas from the US and Qatar, it would seem, while at the same time AGL is exporting huge amounts of Australian gas. So did those efforts you went to last year achieve anything?
Well, they certainly have, because as I said earlier, the ACCC has reported that gas prices have fallen by up to 50%. But AGL's decision back in 2015 to export 254 petajoules of gas to markets in Asia was a terrible decision. It shortchanged its customers. It was short-sighted. It was irresponsible. And AGL have a lot of explaining to do to their customers, not necessarily their shareholders, to their customers, as to why they sold 254 petajoules of gas to customers in Asia, and now they're looking to build expensive import terminals to provide exactly that same service.
Well, I guess the question to you then is, why doesn't the government pull the trigger on export controls? It now has the power to do so.
Because what we did is we entered into a heads of agreement with the LNG companies, with the gas companies, and as a result they have put more gas into the domestic market. Let me just put in perspective for you what AGL has done. It's more than $2 billion worth of gas. It went against the advice of their own economic team in the years prior to that decision, which said that if more gas was not developed, it would be difficult to meet both domestic consumer needs as well as Australia's export needs. They then proceeded to enter into an export contract with GLNG, which is made up of Cogas, Petronas, Total and Santos. And those companies export that gas into Asia. 254 petajoules of gas. Now, New South Wales, in any one particular year, every household, every business, every industry will use a combination of 120 petajoules of gas. So they've sold an enormous amount overseas.
Why don't you use this trigger that you now have to stop them, particularly when analysts are saying there's a bigger gas shortage coming, demand is rising in China, this is going to suck up a lot of gas on the international market. Will you use that export trigger?
Well, we will not rule anything out when it comes to ensuring that there is sufficient domestic gas supplies for the public. We have seen prices come down. One of the ways to see prices come down even further is for states to lift their mindless bans and moratoriums on the development of gas. We've seen in Victoria they're sitting on 40 years worth of domestic supplies. They have restrictions not just on unconventional gas, which may involve fracking, but also onshore conventional gas. We're pleased that the Northern Territory has lifted their ban and is going to start to develop their gas. And in New South Wales, they're importing more than 95% of gas, even though they have domestic gas supplies. But the key point here is back in 2012, David, Labor was warned when they were in government that if they developed a large export industry, that it could produce a tight supply balance and increase prices. Yep, they ignored those warnings, and we're now paying the price.
You're the one saying you'll fix it, and yet all we hear is still, you know, we're not ruling out using the trigger. Why not use the trigger?
Because what we've got is a better result right now, a better result with more gas coming into the market as a result of the Prime Minister's intervention with the companies.
But AGL building an import terminal? I mean, surely no one needs to import gas to Australia.
Well, they shouldn't have to, because we have it here in the ground, but if the states were to develop it more and if companies like AGL did not export it, then we would have been in a better position than we have been.
Let's turn to the market generally. Last week, the Tomago aluminium smelter in New South Wales had to shut down 3 times because there wasn't enough power in the system. Its boss, Matt Howell, says the system's in crisis. He says this is not summer with extreme demand. This is the likely future of our energy grid as once reliable baseload generators exit the market and are most likely replaced with intermittent wind and solar projects. Do we need more baseload generators in the system?
We certainly need what is called dispatchable power. That is power on demand, regardless of what the weather is. That is the purpose behind the National Energy Guarantee. I've spoken at length with Matt Howell and other major manufacturers in Australia. They understand the need for the National Energy Guarantee because for the first time it will put a premium on reliability. What we saw in South Australia under the Weatherall government was lots of wind and not enough baseload power, and they paid the highest prices in the country as a result. Bill Jordan had no pain.
Is dispatchable power batteries, I mean, as well as coal-fired power, but it includes batteries?
It can include, obviously, coal, gas, batteries, pumped hydro facilities, but what we have with the National Energy Guarantee is a premium on reliability, which will see Australia's 20 coal-fired power stations, which currently have an average life of 27 years, stay in the system to provide the necessary support for big manufacturers like Tomago Smelter.
But Matt Howell at Tomago says batteries, they're good for 8 minutes. They need coal-fired baseload power.
Well, look, they are just one part of the jigsaw. We have overwhelmingly our system being supplied by the coal fleet, and it's critical that we continue to have fossil fuel generation in Australia, and anyone that thinks we can decarbonise our economy overnight will see the lights go out on the east coast of Australia. That's the irresponsibility of Labor's recklessly high emission targets, which they don't recognise or realise how they'll actually meet them. We have a considered plan, a costed plan. We're implementing it, and it will see reliable, affordable power.
So we got more details on Friday from the Energy Security Board about the detailed design of the National Energy Guarantee, or the draft detailed design. Look, it says if energy retailers don't source enough low emissions energy, they will face penalties of up to $100 million. Is that the sort of penalty necessary to force them into adopting more green power?
Well, the purpose of the penalties is to ensure compliance with the regime, and the purpose of the regime is to ensure that we get prices down and reliability up. We don't foresee a situation where these companies will be in breach. The rules will be very clear. It will be in their economic interest to abide by them. But this compliance regime is a sensible one, considered one, and it looks to have the support of the states.
And this draft design recommends what's called a straight line lowering of emissions between 2020 and 2030 to get to that target of 26% lower emissions. Is that the trajectory you want to see?
Well, there is flexibility in the trajectory where you can underachieve by up to 10% and carry forward into the future year, which does allow you to get the lowest cost of compliance. And that's the key point here. Technology costs for new generation is coming down all the time. This builds in a bit of flexibility, which ultimately will achieve lowest cost to the consumer. What
was the mood on the phone hookup on Friday with your state and territory counterparts? Does it feel like you're going to get a deal in August on this National Energy Guarantee?
Well, we're certainly not complacent about that, but the conversation and the mood for the discussion was very constructive. I think the pennies dropped for the states, that the National Energy Guarantee is not only Plan A, it's actually Plan A, B, C and D. There is no other alternative on the table. This is the recommendation from the Independent Energy Security Board, the best experts we have in the country. For the first time, we're putting a premium on reliability, which will ensure that the lights don't go out on the east coast of Australia while at the same time lowering power prices. A 23% reduction in wholesale prices for customers, which if you're a big plastics manufacturer could be $1 million a year saving in your energy bill, or if you're a paper manufacturer, $10 million a year saving in your energy bill. This is what we need to ensure that we continue to create the blue-collar jobs that Australians need and want. So I think the penny has dropped, that we need this policy. It's got the support of large energy users like the BlueScopes, the BHPs, the Rio Tintos, the Dow Chemicals, as well as the irrigators, the farmers, the business councils, and so forth. So it has broad support. If we don't capture this moment, if we don't seize this opportunity to land the National Energy Guarantee, you will see more interventions, higher prices, and a less reliable system.
Minister, just on a couple of other issues finally, is the government going to sell the ABC?
No, it's not. The ABC is an iconic national institution. It provides valuable services to our regions and to our cities. It's not going to be sold, and it can never be sold. Of course, everyone has some frustrations from time to time with the coverage in on the ABC, and it's important to vent those frustrations and to make it known. But it is in the public's hands for a good reason. The parliamentary party decides the policy of the government, and the government's policy is not to sell.
So the Liberal Party membership have got it wrong?
Well, the Liberal Party membership, of course, are entitled to their views and are as frustrated as we are from time to time about the coverage on the ABC. But the reality is this is an iconic national institution which will remain in the public's hands. The
other motion passed at the Federal Council this weekend was to shift the Australian Embassy in Israel to Jerusalem. Is that going to happen?
Well, that's not Turnbull government policy. But as you know, Donald Trump did move the embassy from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem, consistent with long-standing public commitments from previous presidents, from Clinton and Obama to George W. Bush, as well as Bush's father. So that position has been publicly known, but Jerusalem has been the home of Israel since Jesus was a boy and before, and it will continue to be so, and I'm sure over time more countries will move their embassy to Jerusalem, just like the United States has.
What's your own view on it, Josh Frydenberg? Should Australia do the same?
Well, I share the government's position. Israel has no better friend in the world than Malcolm Turnbull and Julie Bishop. They've been fantastic supporters for Israel, and they've called out the duplicity and the double standards that we've seen in the United Nations, like most recently with the Human Rights Council. So they have their heart and their head in the right position when it comes to the only democracy in the Middle East. And they understand that Israel wants a two-state solution with a Palestinian state and Israel's security provided.
Just a final one. You wrote during the week about this controversy over the Ramsay Centre Western Civilisation course not being picked up by the ANU, the Australian National University. We'll see where it lands now. But what have you made of this controversy and the debate about who's really to blame for it not landing at the ANU?
Well, of course it's the ANU, because they should have sat down with the Ramsay Centre if they really had a will to make this happen, and ensured that the teaching of Western civilisation in our universities continues. It's absolutely critical that the next generation of students understand about where the rule of law came from, where democracy came from, freedom of speech, freedom of religion, women's suffrage. I mean, we are, as John Howard has said repeatedly over the years, a product of Western civilisation. It doesn't matter which country you come from when you come to Australia. You subscribe and ascribe to the values that make us great, and they are the values of the Judeo-Christian ethic. So I think this was a very bad decision by the ANU. I'm really worried about the lurch to the left, or the long march to the left on our campuses, and I think people need to speak out about it, because it's a new fault line in the debate. This is not a cultural war. This is about where is Australia heading. And in order to know where you're going, you have to know where you come from. And we come from the Judeo-Christian ethic. This, for me and for my colleagues, is absolutely vital. We need to fight on it. We need to make it well known that our position is not for changing.
All right, Minister for Energy and the Environment, Josh Frydenberg, thanks so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you.